Hello and welcome to News Central TV. My name is Mazino Appeal. The top stories this hour. Supreme Court reverses judgment in 16 governors' suit against legality of the EFCC. And MSF suspends operations in Burkina Faso due to escalating attacks. Kenyan High Court hears impeached Deputy President's appeal. Details coming up shortly. Now let's begin by telling you that the Supreme Court has reserved judgment in the suit filed by 16 states challenging the constitutionality of the laws establishing the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and 2 other agencies. According to the Supreme Court, the date for the judgment will be communicated to the parties. During the resumed hearing on Tuesday, Imo, Bauchi and Osun states joined the suit as co-plaintiffs, while Anambra, Ebonyi and Adamawa states withdrew their cases, which were subsequently struck out by the court. The Attorney General of the Federation, Lateef Fagbemi, representing the defendant, requested the court's permission to submit a process filed earlier that morning. Justice Uwani Abba-Aji granted leave for the defendants to use the reply on point of law. In the meantime, a coalition of civil society groups say Nigerians should be guided and bound by law, stating that whenever questions arise that involves undermining the Constitution by action or inaction of government or individuals, such questions must be answered via a thorough interrogation by the judiciary to make interpretations to clear all doubts and contestations in that respect. This was their position shortly after the Supreme Court reserved ruling on the suit by 16 governors challenging the constitutionality of EFCC and other anti-graft agencies. The coalition, while addressing newsmen in Lagos, said the court should be allowed to determine whether these agencies were duly formed in line with the provision of the 1999 Constitution as amended or not.
The preliminary objection action instituted by the federal government on this matter smacks of anarchical tendencies. One would have expected the federal government to go to the court to argue its case against the 19 states, rather than apply for it to be struck out prematurely, which many Nigerians have interpreted to mean an attempt to intimidate the judiciary into doing the bidding of the AG. At this point, let me make some clarifications. That on this table, those of us who are here are known names and faces in the society space in Nigeria, and have at one point or the other played our role in getting democracy to where it is today. So our voices today is not that of strangers, but that of those who have actively participated in how Nigeria got to where it is. And we are so much interested in how Nigeria moves from where it is to where it should be. Hence, we do not pander to emotions. We do not pander to sentiments. We pander to the issues that we are currently discussing, which is the Constitution of Nigeria, that should and must be upheld by all and sundry at all times. This is so uncalled for. The court should be allowed to determine whether these agencies were duly formed in line with the provision of the 1999 Constitution as amended or not. If it was, that's the end of the case. And we would have been able to give legitimacy to the agencies that are so mentioned, the ICPC, the EFCC, and the NFIU. But if not, we would be presented with another opportunity to get it right as a nation. And from all indications, the establishment of these agencies were made by FG's fiat by dwelling disproportionately on international conventions and obligations of which Nigeria are fundamentally inferior to Nigeria's constitution. Let's not forget, I think we need to go back memory lane to know how these agencies came to be. That at the twilight of Obasanjo's administration, where he wanted the debt cancellation for Nigeria, one of the reasons given for not wanting this debt cancelled was the fact that money laundering was at its peak in Nigeria. And Nigeria was one of the 23 countries.
The Lagos state government's plan to build a new airport in Lekki may face legal challenges due to an existing agreement with Bauchi Aviation Services, which forbids new airport constructions while their concession at Murtala Muhammad Airport 2 is active. Despite this, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu met with officials from the Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority and the Federal Airports Authority to expedite the project. Experts back the airport, saying it will ease traffic at the busy Murtala Muhammad Airport. In 2022, the federal government approved the Lekki International Airport project. However, Bauchi holds a 36-year concession, of which only 17 years have passed. potentially complicating the new airport's construction. Politics now. Governors elected on the platform of the People's Democratic Party have summoned the party's acting national chairman, Umar Damagun, and National Secretary Samuel Anyanwu to a crucial meeting today. The meeting comes ahead of the planned National Executive Committee session scheduled for Thursday. At the gathering, the Olagunsoye Onyilola-led Reconciliation Committee is expected to present its findings and potential recommendations to the party's National Working Committee. Speaking to journalists after a meeting with the PDP National Assembly caucus in Abuja on Monday, Onyilola, the former governor of Osun State, assured that the party is finalizing strategies ahead of the Ondo State governorship election and is actively working to reconcile aggrieved members to ensure a united front for future challenges. And now to security matters. Minister of Defence Muhammad Badaru has reaffirmed the federal government's commitment to resolving the ongoing farmer-herder clashes in Plateau State. Speaking in Jos during a meeting with opinion leaders, traditional rulers and security agencies, Badaru expressed deep concern over the continued violence despite efforts to address the issue. The meeting took place at a 3-division headquarters in Basa local government area. Badaru warned against partitioning communities along ethnic or religious lines, describing such division as disastrous. He emphasized the need for harmonious coexistence and vowed that the government would not entertain demands for segregation. Now to discuss this, we're joined by the National President of the Birom Youths Mold Association, Solomon Wantii. Solomon, you're welcome. Good afternoon. Good to have you here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. Yeah. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Now, what underlying factors contributes to the escalation of farmers-herders clashes in Plateau State, and how can these be systematically addressed?
Oh, of course. It is based on available authority that the renewal of violence eruption in the state has engulfed so many lives in the recent times, especially around Bokos, Barikiladi, and Riom, local government areas in the state. And of course, communities, stakeholders have raised, concerned that what is informing these incessant attacks on villages and communities, and as well as incident of cattle rustling, is purely, act of terrorism. And also the merchants of crisis have risen up again, because over time we've had relative peace. But of course, now that people are about harvesting their farm crops, this is the time now the herders have come in again, harvesting people's crop, ambushing people, harassing and threatening them, and then also issue of kidnapping has also been, witnessed in the recent times. And then, of course, we've also seen counter reactions from the native communities having been attacked, having been killed, of course, also coming to attack, cattle that are being raided. So these are basically the major factors that have been playing out in the recent time. For instance, just the night before yesterday, in Tahoe's community of local government, communities went overnight, and herders, suspected Fulani headsmen went overnight and grazed and also harvested not less than 60 farm lands. And so when the people went yesterday to harvest their crops, they discovered that everything has been harvested. And then the remaining part have been grazed upon overnight. So these are actually the factors that are really, causing the renewal of attacks on the plateau. And of course, the way forward as a person and also as a frontline advocate is one, there should be ban on open grazing. It will help, issue of mischievous grazing, willful destruction of farm crops, using of underage children, and other, factors that have been playing out when it comes to destruction of farm crops. And it will also, cut down the exposure of these, animals to cattle rustlers. Because hardly will you ever hear that, cattle have been rustled at their base, at where they've been housed overnight. But it's only when they've been, been grazed, moving about, that is when the cattle rustlers, have the opportunity to rustle them. So this one calls for ban on open grazing in the state, just as we have it in, Benue State, even though coming of that legislation in Benue did not actually cut down the incident of, attacks and counterattacks. But of course, to some extent, it has reduced drastically the tendencies of rustling cows, destruction of farm crops, and what have you. So I think if the government is able to rise up to the occasion, to bring about this legislation on the plateau, it will be of immense help.
All right, well, Solomon, I hear you with that suggestion regarding the government, but what about the traditional rulers? What role do they play in this regard when it comes to promoting peace?
Of course, the traditional rulers have been the ones at the grassroots, whether we like it or not. And of course, from what I have witnessed, there are a good number of them that are contributing immensely towards, sustenance of peace and stability in the state. Because I've witnessed incidences around farm area where traditional rulers have fished out, bad elements among themselves and surrendered same to the appropriate authority for disciplinary measures. So it therefore means traditional rulers are key stakeholders in bringing about peace on the plateau and in Nigeria at large. And I want to believe that is the reason why the minister deemed it fit and wise to have the stakeholders engagement, including traditional rulers, to also, project a way forward. And so traditional rulers have been of immense, even though there are traditional rulers from other extractions that have been fingered in the promotion of this banditry and terrorism, that we are witnessing today. And some of them have been arrested, but of course, after arrest, we see them moving around, and then becoming more emboldened, as if they've been encouraged to continue with any form of terrorism, in the state. So we are still calling that there should be, more state and more engagement, particularly on the side of the tradition.
I think we've unfortunately lost Solomon there, but I think he made plenty of his piece known already. Thank you very much, Solomon, for joining us this afternoon. Now we move on to other news bits. Let's go on a short break. When we come back, medical staff of Federal Teaching Hospital Lokoja allege rights abuse and poor working conditions. The details when we get back. And you're welcome back. Our doctors and health workers at the Federal Teaching Hospital in Lokoja, the Kogi state capital, north-central Nigeria, have accused the medical director of the hospital of rights violations and engaging in unfair labor practices. The health workers say that their rights to free expression and peaceful assembly have continued to be denied, while the working conditions at the hospital has witnessed a steady deterioration in the last few months. Our correspondent Joshua Marai, investigating these claims, is live at the Federal Teaching Hospital in Lokoja to provide more details. Joshua, good afternoon to you. Can you please tell us what you have observed on ground concerning these allegations that have been made?
A sunny afternoon to you, Mazino, from Lokoja, the capital city of Kogi State. I am here currently at the Federal Teaching Hospital. The Federal Teaching Hospital in Kogi here, the capital of Lokoja. And as you can see behind me is a well-painted, well-presented structure of the Federal Teaching Hospital here in Lokoja. But beyond this walls lies a different story, as what you see inside is a direct opposite of what appears to be what you are seeing currently. As you can see, it is a cream-colored edifice, painted, well-painted, and well-presented to the public. But inside this hospital, the wards, there's some units inside the hospital is a different case, as they are clearly dilapidated. Based on our on-the-ground assessments, the situation of the operating room and the common room of the resident doctors in the operating room is not what is pleasant to the eyes, as our on-the-spot assessment actually proved otherwise, that as you can see is quite beautiful, but it is not what it is. So we made some preliminary investigation and findings from some of the doctors here, and we discovered that the allegation of them being their freedom of expression stifled, as well as their association, freedom of association suppressed, seems valid, but because based on a memo we saw from the medical director of the facility here, the resident association, the president of the resident association of doctors was previously suspended as a result of some activities which they classified as a gross violation of the hospital codes of ethics. What are these violations? According to what they say, that some of the doctors wielded placards protesting against the situation of the hospital, and it was not pleasant. And they took to the street and the front of the hospital, as you can see, and as well the commissioner of the Kogi State Health Facility, the office of the commissioner of the Kogi State Health Commission. It was met by a serious clampdown by the medical director of the hospital here. And based on what we gathered, the president of the Resident Association of Doctors was suspended due to that act. According to what they said, and the memo we saw earlier, he was suspended as a result of him protesting and his union members protesting against the activities that has been ongoing behind these walls. And what are the activities? They were complaining of the cold food, particularly that were served to some of the resident doctors. While they complained that it was up to quite below standards, they were met with some resistance by the medical director of the facility, who then summoned a disciplinary committee to try the case of these ones who protested against the entire situation. And the outcome of the disciplinary committee was the suspension of the president of the Resident Association of Doctors.
Well, I want to say thank you very much, Joshua Marai, for bringing us the detailed report of what's happening there in Lokoja. Thank you very much. We'll continue to come to you in subsequent bulletins to, well, ask about details and how it's going. Thank you again. Now, in more news, the federal government, through an accelerated senior secondary school education program in partnership with the Northeast Development Commission, has commenced a two-day workshop for teachers in Borno State. The initiative aims to enhance educational standards across the 6 states of Nigeria's northeast. Now, News Central's Umaru Kirawa has more details on this. Well, we'll bring you that in our subsequent bulletin. Apologies. Now, ahead of the 29th conference of the parties of Azerbaijan climate advocates in Nigeria have called for a comprehensive monitoring and evaluation framework. They say this will help track the progress and impact of local climate initiatives across the country. News Central's Joshua Marai has more.
As the world prepares for the COP29 Climate Change Summit, many in Nigeria believe it is time for the nation to join others in taking center stage so as to address climate change. With Nigeria significantly emitting greenhouse gas emissions and vulnerable to climate-related disasters, the need for effective climate action has never been more pressing. Climate advocates have called for early engagement with the policymakers to help drive meaningful change.
We can also hold governments responsible for this adaptation commitment. Lobby Nigerian government. I feel like we should even do this pre-COP. Forming a relationship with the Nigerian government, because most of the agenda that is taken into COP is already approved, by the parliament in Nigeria before COP. The CSOs are more closely related to the grassroots communities. They are like a bridge between grassroots and government.
They say the establishment of a robust monitoring and evaluation framework will help track outcomes of local climate action across Nigeria.
Monitoring and evaluation framework should be established to check the outcomes of these local climate actions that are being taken, to keep track, okay, are we making progress like the NDCs and other initiatives that are put in place.
Thank you so much.
Speaking on the challenge of reporting climate change, some journalists say there's a need for capacity building within the media to help effectively create awareness on the effects of climate change.
First, the media has to be aware. There's need for more capacity building for journalists to know these issues. I think so because I'm aware myself. I know there's a huge communication gap amongst my own community. So there's need for journalists to know, to be more aware of these issues, so that they now can help highlight these problems the way they are and push into our people for them to take this action. As pre-COP discussion gained traction, experts say that an informed media is essential to holding government accountable and enhancing public support for climate adaptation. In Abuja for News Central, I am Joshua Marai.
At the Delta State government's the Power of Her Women's Conference in Asaba, speakers emphasized the importance of women supporting and uplifting one another to achieve political and economic empowerment. News Central's Austin Azu brings us more in this report.
A group of young women from various backgrounds and sectors conveyed on Unity Hall Government House, Asaba, the Delta State capital, to collectively raise their voices and share experiences in promoting women's leadership in politics and governance. Distinguished keynote speakers addressed critical issues facing women today, such as effective leadership, balancing professional and personal responsibilities, and overcoming challenges and stereotypes in leadership roles. Through their personal stories, they encouraged attendees to remain dedicated to their passions and ambitions, avoiding the temptation to prioritize individual interests over collective progress and instead striving to realize their full potential.
So you must learn how to manage your time and also prioritizing the things that are important. You cannot do everything. You cannot be everywhere.
Anything you set your mind to, particularly you can be a powerful woman in politics and in governance.
Way forward is very simple, but in principle it's kind of hard, especially for people who do not understand how important it is for the female to not just be empowered, but for us to actually create opportunities for females. Realize that the subject matter starts from our education, it starts from home, it starts from everything that it is that we do as a people, as a government, and as individuals.
Representing the governor's wife, Mary Erijo, the executive assistant to Governor Sheriff Oborewori on women mobilization, highlighted the connection between the event and the You Matter Charity Foundation, a key initiative of the governor's wife, urging women to continue uplifting one another.
A lot of us have learned. Even we who are the elderly, we also have been taught, we've gotten messages today that we'll go back to our communities and begin to empower and pull up those who are down and empower them politically and otherwise.
Miracle Arimobi, Special Assistant to Governor Oborewori on Female Youth Development and the program's convener, outlined its objectives, calling on young women to develop essential leadership skills in preparation for future leadership roles.
Advice to young girls in Delta State as they navigate through the political terrain and the system is that they should understand that there's a need for mentorship, there's a need for collaboration and partnership, there's also a need for respect and unity.
Participants shared the valuable insights they gained during the events.
I learned how to manage myself as a woman, how to manage being a mother, how to manage being a leader. And also women involvement in politics. Yes, that women need to actually get involved in the system.
Every woman has the ability to do things. This goes to the young ones out there. Do not limit yourself. Do not look down on yourself. Have the confidence, the boldness that the leadership of a woman is the future of tomorrow.
The panel of experts offered an in-depth exploration of how young women can harness their potential while navigating the political landscape. In Delta for News Central, I'm Austin Azu.
The Corporate Accountability and Public Participation has called Africans and allies worldwide to stand together against the privatization of water resources. The group made the call during a press conference on Monday in commemoration of the 4th Africa Week of Action Against Water Privatization. The theme, Water Justice Over Profit, focuses on interrogating the rising wave of discontent in Africa against public disinvestment by governments and on exposing the external forces and technical strategies that drive the privatization agenda.
Water justice demands more than just the provision of water. It calls for fair and equitable distribution of water resources, prioritizing public welfare over private profits. It emphasizes the need for community management of water resources and a participatory approach to water governance that includes the voices of all citizens, especially the marginalized and disadvantaged.
Across the continent, we face a variety of assaults on our human right to water from corporations and their backers. In Nigeria, USAID, WaterAid, FCDU, AFDP, Global Water Partnership, among others, have promoted these privatization ventures. Particularly, support for privatization schemes and influence on water management in Lagos State has been connected to the sacking of hundreds of unionized workers in recent times, and this is steering the city towards privatization of water.
Recently, the Lagos State government announced intentions to ban sachet water, commonly known as pure water, and other single-use plastics beginning January 2025. This decision is part of a broader environmental effort to address the significant plastic waste problem which clogs drainage systems, contributes to flooding, and harms marine ecosystems. However, what alternatives are being made to cushion these bans?
For the government to be sincere in tackling a problem they originally created, they must also create the solution. So what Lagosians are supposed to be asking is, where is the public water utility to, as we phase this out, then what replaces it? For your information, those water that we say pure water accessible to the poor, there's actually almost like a cabal that also are benefiting for the non-availability of public water in Nigeria.
On a continent where many live on less than $1 a day, commodifying water deepens existing inequalities and exacerbates the water crisis rather than resolving it. Advocates argue that privatization leads to higher water tariffs, deteriorating infrastructure, and reduced governmental accountability, all of which contribute to water scarcity and inequity. In Lagos, for News Central, I'm Bettina Nwili.
Now coming up, European Union calls for transparent, credible ballot count in Mozambique. We'll bring you the details and many more when we get back after the break. News continues in West Africa, where medical charity Medecins Sans Frontières has suspended its operations in Djibo, a city in northern Burkina Faso, due to escalating attacks by terrorist groups. In a statement, MSF's head of West and Central Africa program, Moussa Ousmane, said the decision followed repeated incidents targeting health centers, water distribution points, and even MSF facilities. Ousmane said the team required sufficient security conditions to continue their mission and provide essential support to communities affected by violence and insecurity. He added that MSF's office had been hit by gunfire in July, damaging water supply stations the charity had installed. MSF had previously halted operations across Burkina Faso in February 2023, following the killing of 2 of its medics by armed groups in the country's northwest. To East Africa now, Kenya's High Court is hearing Rigathi Gachagua's case to overturn his impeachment as deputy president. Gachagua was removed from office on charges of inciting ethnic divisions and undermining the judiciary, allegations that he denies. The High Court has suspended his impeachment, but both Gachagua and President William Ruto are contesting the court's jurisdiction. Gachagua's legal team argues that the 3-judge bench was not constituted by the Chief Justice, while Ruto insists the case should be heard by the Supreme Court due to its constitutional implications. The impeachment has triggered a political saga with heightened security at the court premises. To Southern Africa now, where European Union elections observers on Tuesday reported irregularities in Mozambique's general election, fiercely contested by the opposition. The EU urged election authorities in the Southern African nation to ensure a transparent and credible ballot count, with clear traceability of results from polling stations. Tensions escalated on Monday when riot police in the capital, Maputo, used tear gas to disperse protesters, alleging fraud in the 9th October presidential and parliamentary elections. This follows the recent killings of 2 associates of opposition presidential candidate Venancio Mondlane. The EU condemned the deaths of Elvino Diaz and Paulo Guambe, calling for calm and restraint from all parties involved. Now still ahead, ex-president of Peru gets 20 years for money laundering. We'll bring you details of this and more after the break. Welcome back. A court in Peru has sentenced former President Alejandro Toledo to 20 years and 6 months in prison for corruption and money laundering. Prosecutors say he accepted $35 million in bribes from a Brazilian construction company that was awarded a contract to build a road in southern Peru. The 78-year-old Toledo, who was in office between 2001 and 2006, was arrested 5 years ago in California, where he had lived and worked for many years, and was extradited to Peru last year. The Brazilian company, Odebrecht, admitted to paying millions of dollars in bribes to officials across Latin America and the United States to secure government contracts.
Fallamos, condenando a Alejandro Toledo Manrique como autor del delito contra la administración pública en la modalidad de colusión previsto y sancionado en el artículo 384 del Código Penal. En calidad de autor del delito de lavado de activos, delito previsto y sancionado en el artículo 1 de la Ley 27.765, en agravio del Estado. En suma, se le impone 20 años de pena privativa de libertad, 20 años 6 meses de pena privativa de libertad, la misma que será computada a partir del 23 de abril del año 2023.
North Korea has denied allegations that it sent troops to support Russia in the ongoing war in Ukraine. This marks the first official response from Pyongyang following the claim made by South Korea. Addressing the issue at the UN General Assembly session in New York, a North Korean representative dismissed the accusation, stating that his delegation does not feel any need to comment on such groundless stereotyped rumors aimed at smearing the image of the DPRK. The denial follows claims made by South Korea's intelligence agency, which stated on Friday that North Korea had decided to send a large-scale troop deployment to aid Moscow. According to reports, 1,500 special forces were already in Russia's Far East, undergoing training. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for the Ukraine conflict to be resolved peacefully and swiftly during his meeting with President Vladimir Putin in the BRICS summit in Russia on Tuesday. The three-day summit, held under tight security in the city of Kazan, is the largest international event in Russia since the Ukraine conflict began in 2022, with Putin aiming to build an alliance to challenge Western hegemony.
एक्सेलेंसी, रूस और यूक्रेन के बीच चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय पर हम लगातार संपर्क में रहे हैं। जैसा मैंने पहले भी कहा है, हमारा मानना है कि समस्याओं का समाधान शांतिपूर्ण तरीके से ही होना चाहिए। शांति और स्थिरता की जल्द से जल्द बहाली का हम पूरी तरह समर्थन करते हैं। हमारे सभी प्रयास मानवता को प्रमुखता देते हैं। आने वाले समय में भी भारत हर संभव सहयोग देने के लिए तैयार है।
Our former U.S. President Donald Trump has called on Christians across the nation to stand up and protect their religious freedom and free speech, warning that both could be at risk if Vice President Kamala Harris is elected. Speaking at the 11th Our Family Leaders meeting in North Carolina, Trump urged attendees to vote, saying they are not going to have the life they should have, a life of prosperity, hope and beauty, if they do not take action. His remarks come as he continues to rally support ahead of the upcoming elections, stressing the importance of faith-based values in shaping the country's future.
Voting for these people are a nightmare. I don't know what they have against Catholics, but Catholics are treated worse than anybody. So, and by the way, evangelicals are next. You can bet on it. So Christians, get everyone you know and vote. You have to vote, or we're not going to have the life that we should have, a life of prosperity and hope, a life of beauty. We're not going to have it. We're going to be fighting for our lives. Your religious liberty will be gone. Your free speech will be gone. Your Second Amendment will be gone. And parental rights will be gone forever. So I'm here tonight to deliver a simple message to Christians across America. It's time to stand up and save your country. But Kamala will force doctors and parents to allow sex changes and genital mutilation of minor children. That's what they do. But as I look back at my life's journey and events, I now recognize that it's been the hand of God leading me to where I am today.
On October 4th, 2024, Nigeria's federal government proposed a 5% excise duty on telecommunications, gaming and betting services as part of the Nigeria Tax Act, aimed at reforming the tax framework and consolidating various tax laws. This duty will apply to both prepaid and postpaid telecom services and all types of gaming and betting activities. This legislation also seeks to regulate currency transactions by imposing duties on value exceeding the Central Bank of Nigeria's official exchange rate. The government expects this new tax regime to boost non-oil revenue and improve regulatory oversight. On Business Edge, Perpetua Fagbemi Peter asked Tajuddin Ibrahim from Chapel Hill Denham Securities for insight on how this excise duty impacts the gaming and betting sector in Nigeria.
About a sin tax. A sin tax is the kind of tax that is introduced by the government on some goods that are considered harmful to the society, also harmful to individuals. That is the basis in which we understand the fact that in 2022, for instance, we had those excise duty on tobacco, on beer and stout, on wines, on spirits, and also on some non-alcoholic carbonated drinks. So when we now come to gaming and betting, they are in the same category. So which means that it will be hard to defend the fact that the government is looking to implement some taxes on those segments. So because their activities, according to global standards, can be considered as harmful to the society or harmful to individuals one way or the other. But when we take a look at the telecommunications sector, I think that is the only sector that is not in line with all of these other subsectors, but there are laws by the government that that have been put in place to support what the government wants to do around the telecommunications sector, except, of course, if they repeal those laws or they roll it back. That is when the sector can be completely free. But as for gaming and betting, I reckon those taxes are appropriate to my view.
Tito Mboweni, a prominent figure in South African economic policy, passed away on October 12, 2024, following a brief illness. He held key positions including Minister of Labour, Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, and Financial Minister, where he advocated for significant reforms in labour and employment. His tenure as Finance Minister began in 2018, during which he made pivotal decisions like freezing government wages and implementing reforms to stimulate economic growth. Mboweni's legacy includes the impactful Tito Paper and his effective response to the COVID-19 pandemic, enhancing the lives of many South Africans. Now on Business Edge, Perpetua Fagbemi Peter asked Professor Alex Roux of the University of Stellenbosch Business School about Mboweni's transformative labour legislation and its current significance in South Africa.
Subjective issue when it comes to labour in general, unemployment and labour laws. Many would argue that these laws are too constrictive and make it more difficult to employ somebody. But I think the counter-argument is that prior to introducing these laws protecting especially black labor were virtually non-existent. So for a good almost 80 years, go back to the 1920s, there were virtually no laws governing how black workers should be treated or should not be treated. And so when these laws were introduced, they came out of almost nowhere and appeared to be very dramatic and very drastic. They're probably not much different to what you would have found in most parts of the world, but they came so suddenly and all in one go that it created the impression of being very constrictive. Obviously, fast forward 30 years, they still play a role, one would argue, a role in the country's high unemployment rate. I do not think they play a major role or a dominating role. There are other reasons for unemployment, which are more structural, things such as education, training, and the like. But certainly, it is argued in some circles that if labor laws were to be a bit more relaxed today, it might make labor more attractive as a production factor. But again, I want you to think about the context of mid-1990s. After years and years of virtually no protection, it was necessary to bring in laws and legislation and ways of protecting the job tenure, the job conditions, working conditions of especially black unskilled labor. So I think it was the right thing at the right time, and perhaps not as drastic as one might have thought, but 30 years later, perhaps not having had the desired effect.
And we have breaking news for you now as the Federal High Court sacks Kano Electoral Commission chairman and others 4 days to local government election in the state. We'll continue to follow this and developments and bring you details as we commence or continue with the news. Stay tuned. And now we move on to more. And that's all the news we have for you this hour. But before we go, let's take another look at some of the major stories that we brought. The Supreme Court has reserved judgment in 16 governors' suit against legality of the EFCC, and MSF has suspended operations in Burkina Faso due to escalating attacks. We also told you that Kenyan High Court is hearing impeached Deputy President's appeal. Now to remember that you can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Able TV, and of course on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.